When I was 29 years old, I met my now husband. It was an unexpected encounter. We were attracted to each other, gradually developed a deep relationship, and eventually came together. After we got married, we didn't plan to have children. We wanted to be able to focus on our careers and our common interests. We believed we could lead a full and happy life. However, when I was 33 years old, I became pregnant. This unexpected news sent us into deep thought. We realized that this was a precious life and we had a responsibility to care for and love it. We made a joint decision to keep this child. We believed that this child would give us more love and meaning. We began to prepare for the new life that was to come. Shortly after my child was born, I had a terrible dream. I dreamed that I had been in a terrible car accident that resulted in the loss of my life. This dream made me feel very scared and upset. For the next few months, whenever I drove, images of this dream would come to my mind. I told myself that it was just a dream and that I should not see it as some kind of omen. I became very cautious and sensitive to every detail of my driving. Every time I overtook a car or faced a complicated traffic situation, I felt a wave of unease and fear. 3 months later, the accident happened. That day, I was about to pick up my son from my mother's house. After I got off the highway, I was about to make a left turn at the next intersection. As I approached the intersection, I noticed that the traffic light was turning red and I sped up. Just then, a truck came directly at me. Time seemed to slow down and I heard an ear-splitting crash. The large truck slammed into my minivan. The car began to shake violently, and my body swayed uncontrollably from side to side. The violent impact made me feel dizzy. Shards of glass and metal floated in the air. At this time, the airbag suddenly popped out. The strong impact made my consciousness start to become blurred. I tried to open my eyes, but the world around me seemed to become distorted and blurred. It was like my eyes were covered with a fog. I could feel my breathing become rapid and difficult, as if a huge stone was pressing on my chest, making it impossible for me to breathe. After a while, I appeared in a darkness. I was floating in the darkness of space, where there was no concept of time. Everything seemed to have disappeared, leaving only silence. In this darkness, I did not feel fear. I could feel a faint warmth. A huge hand suddenly appeared in the darkness. I followed the hand's guidance and moved quickly through the darkness. As I was moving, I saw some blurred images. I saw my family and friends, all of whom were praying silently. I saw my son smile and the love in his eyes. As I moved, I felt a gradual growth of inner strength. Finally, I came to a beautiful place. A magnificent building appeared in front of me. The building seemed to be floating in the air. Curiously, I walked toward the building. It was like a fantastic temple, emitting a dazzling light. I entered the building, and the air around me was filled with a calm and peaceful atmosphere. The interior of the building looked very complicated. I walked along the passageway, which was lined with beautiful frescoes and sculptures. Suddenly, someone called my name. I turned my head and there was my grandfather standing behind me. He was accompanied by a guide, whose eyes revealed wisdom. My grandfather whispered, "Son, you have been in a serious car accident, and you can now choose to stay here. This is your true home." I looked down and I saw the scene of the car accident. I saw that my minivan was very badly damaged. Rescuers were busily working. I saw myself stuck in the car with blood all over my clothes. The wizard told me that this place was full of love and happiness and that there were no troubles here. I didn't give my answer right away. They led me to the top of the building, and I saw a huge throne. On the throne sat a tall man of great stature. However, his face was covered by a mysterious layer of light, so that I could not see his face clearly. But I could still feel the wisdom and power emanating from him. Below the throne, I found many other people in different costumes, who seemed to come from different times. They were kneeling on the ground, gazing reverently at the mysterious figure sitting on the throne. Although I could not identify the mysterious figure, I sensed that his presence had a special meaning for each person. He may be a symbol of wisdom, or perhaps the ruler of this mysterious world. In any case, his presence gave people strength and faith, so that they could find belonging and hope. I felt a special connection with this mysterious figure. I realized that in this beautiful and serene place, I could find the answers to my inner self and gain strength and guidance. I continued to walk toward the throne. As I stood in front of him, he reached out a hand and gently touched my forehead. A warm energy passed into me, and my thoughts gradually cleared. He did not speak, but we could communicate through our consciousness. In this beautiful place, time seemed to lose its meaning. We discussed my life and my work. We also talked about the secrets of the soul. However, these precious memories were later erased as if they belonged only to that particular place. I realized that, as humans, we may not be able to fully understand these secrets, because they are beyond our limited perception. Perhaps it is this uncertainty of not being able to fully understand that will allow us to grow better on Earth. In the end, he told me that I could choose to return to the real world and continue my life's journey, or I could stay in this place. Whichever decision I made, he would respect and accept my choice. I was struggling internally. I stared at the mysterious man, not knowing how to make a choice. At that moment, I thought of my son. If I stayed, what should I do with my son? He was only 6 months old. His father didn't even know how to take care of him. My grandfather reassured me that your son and family would be fine. Time will heal the hurt and your mother will come out of her grief and find the courage to live again. Your husband will also grow out of his grief and learn to care for your son. He went on to explain that death is an inevitable event in life, and it is a lesson we must face and learn. Your loss is also a necessary lesson for those around you. Thoughts of my son make my heart heavy again. I could not bear the thought of him growing up without his mother. Next, I saw my son's future life. When he was about 10 years old, he had a new mother. She was a very kind woman who was very good to my husband and son. I felt a twinge of relief to see how close they were to each other. But she wanted to have another child with her husband. This was not acceptable to me, and I knew that she could not love her children equally. This was not the outcome I wanted. I longed to return to my son and witness his growth and progress. I could not give up my human life, I could not give up my love for my son. I made up my mind that I would return to his side. Eventually, I expressed my decision to the mystic. I told him that I longed to return to my son and that he needed my care and love. The mystic replied gently, "Your decision is wise. Your child needs your guidance and support. But remember, when he grows up, you will have the opportunity to return here again. I know that whether I choose to return to Earth or stay here, love and care will always be with me. I am confident that in due time I will come back to this peaceful place again." The process of returning to Earth was amazing. I began to feel the rhythm of my breath and the warmth of my body. I began to feel the subtle movement of my muscles, and my fingers began to twitch subtly. My eyes opened again, adjusting to the change in light. I could hear the sounds around me. The process was not painful. The moment I returned to my body, I felt a new sense of strength and courage. I found myself lying on a soft bed, covered by a white quilt. I was back in the hospital room. The doctor approached me with a relieved smile on his face. My husband stood by the bed with concern and love in his eyes. He held my hand tightly and said in a gentle voice, "Honey, you're finally awake." I smiled and nodded my head. After I recovered, I left the hospital. When I pushed open the door of my home, I saw my son lying on the bed, playing with his favorite toy. He looked up at me with a smile. I reached out my hands and gently picked him up. I laughed happily. My son smiled back. His smile was so innocent, as if to tell me he could feel my love. Whenever I saw my son smile, I knew I had made the right choice. For a year after the accident, I endured severe pain. 2 years later, the pain still had not left me. This made me become extremely depressed. I began to wonder if I would ever be able to return to normal again. The doctors told me that the pain was more present than they had expected. This news was a disappointment to me. I felt trapped in a rut from which I could not escape, as if I would never be free from the pain. I had fantasized about returning to that loving place, free from the pain and suffering on earth. I felt like that was where I belonged, a place free of pain and disease. However, I knew that my son was the only reason for me to continue living. Although my heart would often yearn to return to that place, I accepted the fact that I was back on earth. I readjusted my mindset and I decided to stop letting pain rule my life. I decided to find the meaning of life.
This experience happened in 2001. One day, I received a phone call from my father, who told me that he had just been examined in the hospital. I was shocked to find out that my father had terminal lung cancer and was nearing the end of his life. I knew I had to get to his side as soon as possible, so I got on a plane the next day. I had taken a long vacation because I wanted to be with him during this time. When I arrived, my father was resting quietly on the couch, looking very frail. He looked at me with a smile. During the time I was with my father, he made some important decisions. First, he decided to forego further treatment because he thought it would only cause him more pain. He decided to welcome death. To help my father find peace in his soul, some priests came to his home. They spoke with the father about faith and Jesus Christ. One of the pastors asked, "Do you accept Jesus Christ as your Savior?" This was a key question, and the pastor wanted to make sure that the father was ready to accept God's salvation. Although the father was physically weak, he answered firmly, "I accept." Father wanted to find peace and salvation for his soul by establishing a deeper connection with God in the last stage of his life. From that moment on, Father was in a very peaceful state. He prayed and read the Bible every day, as he had done before. One cold early morning, I stood by my father's bedside and helped him light his last cigarette. I knew that the main cause of his lung cancer was caused by smoking. I had urged him many times to quit smoking, but it was too late to talk about it anymore. A few hours later, my father left me peacefully. I couldn't control my emotions and hugged his body and cried loudly. I felt a deep sense of loss and pain. However, just a few minutes later, I saw my father's spirit appear in the air. It was as if it was telling me that he had achieved relief and happiness. It was a feeling I had never had before, an experience beyond reality. I shouted up into the air in excitement. "Dad, is that you? I love you." At that moment, I felt a special kind of peace and happiness, as if my father's soul had passed on a kind of comfort to me. Later, I told my family members around me about the event. They did not feel excited and thrilled. On the contrary, they reassured me that it was just a hallucination I had when I was extremely sad. These words made me question my own feelings, and I began to think that maybe they were right, maybe I was just missing my father so much that I was hallucinating. 29 days later, something else happened that made me even more convinced that what I was experiencing was real. That morning, I was sleeping in bed when I was suddenly awakened by a strange sound. I sat on the edge of my bed and thought to myself, what is this sound? Why did I feel so strange? I looked at the time, it was only about 7 o'clock. I decided to sleep a little longer. Shortly after I lay down, I suddenly felt someone appear next to me. I looked up and was surprised to find that it was my father. His appearance had changed dramatically. He looked only about 30 years old. He was wearing a pair of jeans and a plaid shirt, an outfit he used to wear before. He looked in very good health. My father's smile was so warm and familiar. My father held my hand, and I could clearly see the details on his left hand. The lines on his fingers were clearly visible. These details made me feel his real presence, as if the connection between us had never been broken. I knew that his spirit had come to me once again. The next thing I knew, I was out of my body. I looked down and saw my body still lying on the bed. I was shocked and excited because it was an experience like no other. My father had been holding my hand, and his presence gave me a sense of strength and comfort. I felt a sense of light weightlessness. I began to move upward with my father. We passed through the roof and then through the clouds. We came to a beautiful and peaceful world. The sun was bright and warm here. Light clouds floated in the sky, creating beautiful patterns and shapes. We continued along a path lined with flowers, which gave off an enchanting fragrance. Father led to a huge square where a lot of people were gathered. Each of them had a smile on his face. They held hands and sang and danced together. I saw a huge table on the right. The table was covered with food. To my surprise, the food was not meat, but some fruit-like food. I noticed that one fruit was similar to an orange, but it was brighter in color and shimmered. There was also another fruit shaped like a grape, but it was blue in color. My father took me out of the lively square and we came to a peaceful countryside. Under a large tree, I found an elderly man sitting in a chair, holding an old book in his hands. Not far from him, two old men were playing chess. Curious, I approached them. The chess board seemed to be floating in the air. They did not need to touch the pieces, they could control the movement of the pieces through their mind. Their eyes were very focused on me. When they determined the position, the pieces would float gently in the air and land on the position they wanted. I was amazed by this wonderful sight. Next, my father took me to the depths of the countryside. A cozy little wooden hut appeared before my eyes. The cottage was surrounded by a faint fragrance of wood. There was a small garden in front of the door. The furniture inside was all handmade. The bookshelves were filled with various books. The windows overlooked the scenery outside. You can see the green hills and the lake in the distance. In another room, various carving tools are stacked. These tools are neatly arranged. My father always loved the art of wood carving. I vividly remember that when I was 7 years old, my father made an exquisite toy pistol out of wood. At that time, I loved this toy pistol so much that I would put it under my pillow every night when I went to bed. At that time, I felt particularly proud and happy. However, as I grew older, I no longer put it under my pillow, and I don't know where it is now. This little room makes me nostalgic for those innocent and wonderful times. My father said to me, "Son, this is my home now, a place free from pain and worry. Remember, no matter what happens, I will always love you. We will not part forever, we will be together again. But for now, you must go back and get on with your life. Pursue your own dreams and don't let yourself be left with regrets." My heart was so conflicted, I longed to stay by his side. My father came closer to me, he ran his hand through my hair and said, "Son, I understand how you feel. You have many things to do and many people to take care of. No matter what time it is, I will always be there for you." I said in a weak voice, "Okay, Dad. I will go back and get on with my life." My father smiled, and his image slowly began to blur. "Remember," he said gently, "we will meet again, and then we will be together forever. I love you, son." After a while, I went back to bed. I slowly opened my eyes, and my mind felt very lost. The clock next to my bed showed the real time and my heart became heavy. I sat up, feeling my body was still a little tired. I sat quietly on the edge of the bed. Although it felt like a dream, the emotions and experiences in it were so real and deep. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I told myself that although my father was no longer with me, his love was still there. I got up from the bed and opened the window, letting the fresh air fill the room. I felt the warmth of the sun. I realized that I still had a lot to do. The next day, I received a call from my brother. On the other end of the line came my brother's excited and thrilled voice. He told me that he had seen his father yesterday. My father was sitting at his bedside and holding his hand. I asked him what else had happened. My brother replied that my father had told me a story, but unfortunately, I don't remember the details now. Then, I continued to ask him if he remembered the clothes his father was wearing. My brother replied that he was wearing a red plaid shirt with a pair of jeans underneath, and his shoes were a pair of brown leather shoes. I was very surprised to hear these details. I asked my brother about the time of the incident. He replied that it was around 7 a.m. The time I saw my father was exactly the same as the time described by my brother. This could not be just a coincidence, it was my father's way of communicating his care to us. This experience reinforced my belief that my father's spirit is still around to watch over us. I know that when I leave this world, I will go to another place to continue my life. Heaven will become my true home. There, I will be reunited with my family again and feel the peace and joy of eternity. Although there are many people who are skeptical about my experience, I don't care what they think. Because I believe that God is all around us and that He loves everyone unconditionally. This experience has convinced me that heaven is real. It is the home of our souls and our eternal home. I will carry this belief through the rest of my days and face the challenges and difficulties of life positively. I know that only through a positive attitude and actions will I be able to join my beloved Father in heaven again someday in the future. I believe in my experience because it has given me strength and courage. I no longer fear death because I know it is only part of the journey of life. My heart is filled with trust in God. If you are experiencing the pain of losing a loved one, I hope my experience can give you some help and comfort. Loved ones who have passed away have not left us, they are still with us and watching over us. We will be together again at some point in the future. Let's face the challenges of life positively and believe in the power of love and hope.